This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR with your hosts, Felix Mitchell
and Louise Fraser.
Now, I've been going to HR conferences for, I guess, over 5 years now. And at every single one, there's a keynote about how important it is to hire for skills and potential rather than experience and direct fit. And yet, every job spec I see, obviously not from Instant Impact, but the vast majority of job specs I see, they just read like shopping lists. You got to have experience here. You got to have experience there. It's this university, this college, this school, this company. Why do we still screen resumes and CVs for keyword matches? And why do we keep asking ourselves why our businesses are slow to make meaningful change? Now, our guest today has spent her career proving that there's a better way. Linda Lowe is head of people and culture at ESG Global. And before becoming a people function powerhouse, Linda started in finance, worked across multiple sectors from magazines to tech startups before eventually moving into HR leadership. It's exactly the kind of non-linear career path that many traditional recruitment processes would filter out. Yet Linda's financial background, as you'll hear, gave her a unique perspective on workforce planning and budgeting that other HR professionals lack. So it's that perspective that I think is going to give us a really exciting podcast today. We're going to explore how to redesign the recruitment process, relook at career pathways within organizations, and making sure that we're looking for people that will add to our culture rather than fit a neat little pre-prescribed box. So, Linda, can't wait to dive into it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Felix. Thank you, Lou, for inviting me this wonderful afternoon. And I'm happy to share any thoughts and, what I've seen in the market and based on what you guys are curious about. Well, I do want to make a correction that I am head of people and culture for ESG, not on the global side. I can't take all the credit because I do have counterparts that is in our Calgary office and also in our Chorley, UK office. So I am essentially responsible for the US portion of our business.
Excellent. Well, I apologize to Team Calgary and Team Chorley, but hopefully they'll forgive us and we can jump straight into this concept of potential. Why do you think that businesses should look at potential?
Oh, well, first of all, I have always followed the philosophy of looking at potential. And I will give you my own example. When I first started my career in finance, right? I am not your traditional finance, accounting type of individual, Actually, I'm not really good with numbers, to be honest. And I kind of fell into it. But I have to say, I was very fortunate in my career because I've worked with great controllers and CFOs that have given me the opportunity. I worked with one amazing CFO until this day. I still regard him as a mentor. And he was actually the one that taught me. He was a very kind of rugged, you're American. He kind of always reminded me of like this rebel James Dean type, right? Not your typical CFO. He would come into the office. He used to ride a motorcycle. He would wear his jeans, his cowboy boots, button down shirt, not like the pocket square type of CFO that you normally would see.
Yeah, I'm not getting CFO from that description.
Yeah, you're not getting CFO, right? But this guy was just, his name is Rick Wester. And until this day, I still have a lot of respect for him. And he came from very humble beginnings, he worked his way, through high school, put himself through university. And he used to always say, you know what, Linda, I hire people for potential, for grit, and what you're willing to do and make out of your life. And it really kind of resonated with me because I realized that the finance team of folks that I worked with did not come from the best prestigious universities. They came from, all sorts of different backgrounds, but this particular team that I worked with, we worked so hard that we actually were in a startup together, and then the company went IPO. And we all, benefited from the company going IPO. And this was in 1998, 99, right? So I have to say, I have a lot of appreciation for people that have grit, that are willing to work hard and actually have integrity. So from there, it sort of resonated with me throughout my career, hiring as a finance manager and then transitioning into HR and working with hiring managers and convincing them to hire people for grit, for what they're capable of doing instead of just looking as what's on paper.
I love that. I love your story as well. I think my career pathway hasn't been, so natural either. And it's usually because people have, taken a punt on the potential that I have. And so I'm fully on board with it. But I can't help but think it's easier sometimes to assess potential once someone's in, right? You see them showing that potential on a regular basis and stretching themselves. So how do you assess potential when you're hiring someone?
Lou, that is such a great question. So I look at someone's resume, CV, and obviously they have the right words to get them into the door, right? Or maybe like the right university behind it, the right name, etc. One of the questions that I always ask each candidate towards the end of the interview is, enough about your professional profile. What do you like to do for fun? And that always catches people off guard because they're like, wait a minute, you're doing a HR phone screen and now you're asking me what I like to do for fun. But there is a reason behind that. The reason why I asked that question is because at times when people tell you what they're interested in, it gives me an insight into who they are as a person. What are they passionate about? And what is it going to take? So I'll give you another perfect example. At one of my last company, I worked for a very competitive advertising company called Data Zoo. It was a startup. It was founded by 4 MIT aerospace engineering majors. Brilliant people, brilliant minds, right? Everyone wanted to join this company because we were one of the hottest advertising tech company, which eventually sold to Roku. We had lots of candidates coming into the door from all the Ivy Leagues. I mean, you name it, all the MIT, Harvard, big brand names. And every day I would go through maybe 20, 30 CVs, resumes, give them a glance for one role. And that's only maybe 20 out of 200 resumes that may come in because I did have a talent team that was also screening them. But I would always say, just give me 20. Let me take a look, because I'm curious. We had this one role, and what finally made us decide on this one candidate was because I asked him what he liked to do for fun. And he said, oh, wow, I actually started a charity in Israel for underprivileged kids playing ultimate frisbee. And I was like, why that? And he said, well, one, frisbees are not expensive. Two, there's lots of outdoor spaces. So people from all socioeconomic background can partake in it because you don't need to buy uniforms, maybe just like a shirt, right? But frisbees are not expensive. And it was important to me to get these kids outside and to play and to, have fun. And he started this charity organization completely like grassroots by himself. And he was from the US and he was going to Israel to do this charity work. And I said, that is the type of people that we want in the company. This guy is from, a very prestigious Ivy League university. He's had all the privileges in his life, right? But this is something that he was passionate about. And he thought he could do good for another country, for children that are underprivileged. And he worked for years to get all the fundraising, to get all the, publicity for this ultimate frisbee program, which is actually still running today.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
And this is someone that, had the tenacity, was, working for others, right? But it was something that he was passionate about. And he got the job. And today he's doing really well as a product manager because we gave him this opportunity. I've got many of these stories, right? But he's one example that I will always remember.
Yeah. I've been thinking the whole time, what would my answer be to that? And maybe I should get some more extracurricular
Well, what do you do?
activities.
What do you do for fun?
I go out running. But I'm also, I've got many charitable causes that I've started to. No, I see, I can't.
I see. I think mine. I think mine would be eating. How sad is that?
I love
Like-
eating also. Might not get you the job.
It might not get me the job. Well, I can get really passionate about eating, so maybe I'll be able to demonstrate that. Linda, so it's interesting because as you're talking, and these stories that you tell, obviously really compelling. And I think often whenever anyone hears about, people like your old CFO, right, who build a team through people who show sort of a non-experience based competency or behavior, it's a lot of us, it's hard not to resonate with that, right? It's hard not to say, yeah, I mean, obviously I've worked with so and so and they didn't have any technical training, but they were amazing. They just taught themselves. Literally everyone has a story like that. So why is it that most businesses don't hire like that? So you're looking at a story which probably is like the cherry on top of a structured hiring process that looks at other things. Why isn't that the primary thing we look for?
I think companies are afraid. Well, first of all, not all managers are great hiring managers, right? So that is a fact. The other thing is that people like to make things easy at times, right? They like to hire someone that they feel that they could just, jump in and do the job. But that's not true. I don't care how brilliant the person is. When you hire the person, there is a training time frame that then you have to train the person to get used to the company, processes, methodologies, etc. But I think also people sometimes hire what they're comfortable with instead of going outside their comfort zone, right? And this is one thing that I always say to hiring managers is you need to challenge yourself to hire people that are different, not because they're a cultural fit. They have to be a cultural add. How do they add to your group so that not everyone is of the same mindset? I use this scenario, stormtroopers. If you're like a Star Wars, that's my generation, right? All the stormtroopers are identical, like they all march the same way. They look exactly the same. And I'm like, how boring will the world be if we were all identical? So what I try to do is convince hiring managers to say, well, you've already got 2 people with this type of personality and skill set, right? What if you throw in someone that has, a different type of experience or a different way of looking at things? And that's how you can kind of see things from all angles to solve a problem instead of there's only one direction, right? Because life is not about just walking in one straight path. There's different curves, there's hills. Lou, if you're a runner like I am, it wouldn't be, if a marathon was continuously just one path, that's easy, right? But it's not. You have hills, you have, downhills, right? You've got turns and things, and that's what makes it very challenging. So what I try to do is when I talk to hiring managers, I give them that sort of perspective. Now, I'm not a miracle worker. I cannot convince everyone to feel the same way. But the way I see it is, at times when I've earned their trust and they're willing to take a chance on certain candidates, and when the candidates do work out really well for their team, that's when I know I've got them in the hook, right? And they're like, okay, bingo, Linda, you were right. Thank you for finding us that individual. Now find us like 10 more, right? So now we can
Of
build
exactly
a
the same
well-rounded
profile.
team. Different profiles now. But really, my philosophy is, how do you find people to be a cultural add to your team, to your organization, instead of hiring everyone that's identical?
Yeah, I love the concept. We certainly use the phrase culture add all of the time. And I know whenever hiring managers come back and they say, well, how do I know what I'm trying to add if I don't, I haven't seen it yet? We like to think about strengths-based leadership, right? So in your team, what are the strengths now and what could make it stronger? What might be missing that you could go further with, I suppose. So I think that's so important. There's lots of conversation around hiring for potential these days. It seems to be a conversation that happens more so than often. And I wonder if it's all the adoption in technology, etc. We want to hire for people that are agile and problem solvers and can move between lots of different functions. Are there any ways that you have found are good to actually assess those types of skills on the way in? Any frameworks? There are lots of companies that offer lots of different testing, etc., I suppose, and try to fix those problems.
Good question. We do. It does depend on the role. It's really interesting now that, when we were in the COVID world, right, it was quite difficult to conduct interviews because you couldn't really do it in person, or we work in such a remote environment now that not everyone can physically be on site. What I actually enjoy very much lately is having the team come back on site with these candidates and doing in-person interviews, which is really nice, I have to say. And then they can do whiteboard sessions in person. At times, depends on certain roles, we will provide a personality test prior to continuing the interview process. What I love about having these whiteboard sessions, whether it's in person or virtual, is it really gives us an insight into the person's thinking, like what's their thought process, what are the steps that they're taking to solve the problem at hand. We live in an AI world now, right? Where it's like, if you ask me a question, I could do like Chat GPT and say, oh, I can read off of what's going on. But when you're doing these whiteboard discussions, you're really having to use your mind and cannot rely on chat. So then it gives us, comfort that the person is doing this independently and not getting assistance, right? I'm not saying that using AI is a bad thing, but at the same time, what we really want is, how is the person performing without assistance based on their, background, the knowledge that they've acquired from whether it's education or previous jobs. So that's what I think has been really nice, is getting people, to be back in the office for some of these interviews, or actually doing, whiteboard sessions on virtual calls as well.
I think that's so important. I mean, not least that I think it's just safe these days. We're seeing loads of, like, not loads of people, but increasing number of people using online avatars that kind of deep fake their faces in real time, which is nuts and really scary. So, I mean, I just think even on a practical basis, I think doing a face-to-face interview is absolutely critical. But I agree with you. I think I personally, and by the way, I am a bad interviewer. I do not like interviewing people. I ask our HR team or people and culture team to join me on the interviews. But I recognize that I'm not a good interview. So I like the structure around me. I like having someone supporting me. But I think one of the things that I do find like difficult to, and one of the reasons I'm bad is that I do find myself naturally warming to specific people within the interview. So how much do you think when you're hiring based on personality traits and behavior, that it's still important to put some objectivity into that?
It is very, very important. At the end of the day, it all does come back to, hey, I could really, really enjoy the person and really like them, right? But they have no skill set whatsoever. That's not gonna work, right? I mean, obviously they have some sort of skill set and knowledge base that got them the interview into the door. And it is very difficult because at times, you really, I say this all the time. I'm like, God, sometimes you just fall in love with a candidate that you're just like, wow, this person will be awesome. But on the other hand, you have another one that comes along and you're like, wow, this one's really got, like, say, all the skill set that we're looking for. But I think it also depends on the role, because some teams will have the time to help someone get ramped, right? Meaning, like, I will tell you, like, some teams that we currently have at ESG, they will have to hit the ground running. Some teams will say, it's okay, Linda, I've got 8 weeks to get that person trained up, right? So it does depend on who the hiring manager is, what the team entails. If a team does not have the time to ramp and they really need someone to come in and hit the ground running, so of course that's going to actually change, your point of view in terms of who you're going to hire. Versus I've got some teams that basically will say, you know what, we're willing to hire people for their potential. We're willing to dedicate time to that individual. So therefore, that also changes, how you're going to hire for that particular team. So every team within the organization has its own flavor, has its own characters, right? I think it's really important as someone in my role or on the talent acquisition side, or whoever is part of the interview panel, is to not only understand the job and what it entails, but what is that team like? Who are the players on the team? Get to know the team, the dynamics of the team. And I think that's really important too, because every hiring manager, every hiring team member, they're looking for something different, right? What marketing is looking for may not be what finance is looking for, and vice versa. So it's really the job of the HR team, the talent acquisition, specialists, to know who the players are when they are partnering up for these hires.
It's interesting actually when you're talking about partnering up, because I'm thinking, you're hiring for potential, so you're solving that one sort of bias problem, I suppose, around someone trying to hire someone who's an exact carbon copy of the experience that they expect to be good. But then you're also, in some ways, opening up a can of worms of, if we're hiring for potential, and potential is quite subjective, does that hiring manager then hire the person that is the most enthusiastic or the most confident or the loudest person in that interview? And so how, as a HR practitioner, do you try and balance that potential for bias and work with hiring managers on ensuring that that's not the case?
Yes. It's so important every time when there is an open requisition. What the practice that I believe in is having a kickoff call. So, companies, you have processes documented, right? You've got your recruiting, what is it? A roadmap in terms of how do you open a requisition? Who are the hiring team members? What does the salary pay, etc. You just can't look at it and say, okay, now I'm going to go and hire this person. So what I've always trained myself and my hiring team of talent acquisition folks is go and have a conversation with the hiring manager, do a kickoff call, 15, 20 minutes. Like, hey, Felix, I understand you just submitted an open requisition. It's been approved for finance. Let's talk about this role. What has changed in your team that is causing this open requisition, to be open today, right? What type of work is this person going to be doing on a day-to-day? What's a day-to-day like? How's the rest of your team doing? What are their thoughts about the current responsibilities that they have? It's really important to have insight into these teams that you're partnering with because things change daily, right? Whether it's different customers, different processes, different ways of operating within the organization. And when you're working in an organization of hundreds and thousands of people, you're not going to know what happens every single day on each individual team or what's going on. I've had managers that say to me, Linda, I need to open a requisition, but it's not because I need someone right now. I think there might be some changes going on. And that's really important also, right? Like, what are the changes? Why? Is it for a mat leave? Is it because there's something else going on within the team? So you really need to kind of have these sort of conversations to have better insight so that you can be a better partner to that team to help them along the process. I always say what we do in HR is let us do the lifting behind the scenes so that you guys can do your jobs.
And I definitely think there's a piece where, and I think it's one of the challenges being in TA or HR. It's nothing we do is like completely new to anyone. It's like, yeah, it's like if I followed sports, I guess it's like being a team like coach or manager. Like everyone thinks they know how to build a good team of individual players. But unless you've looked into the science and practicality behind it, there are huge mistakes that you can fall into. Like, for example, using an analogy about sports when you don't know anything about sports. But I do feel like we are dealing with stakeholders who are enthusiastic amateurs the whole time.
Yes.
So what can you do? And I've got an eye on time here. So maybe if we have this as a sort of closing thought, if you have a hiring community that are resistant to this kind of change and they say, you may have heard this before, but Linda, I've been hiring for 45 years and my team is hugely successful. We are the best finance team in the industry. I'm just going to keep going the way that I'm going right now. What's the answer to that?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. Before we even go to that, I think it's really, really important to establish the relationship with the hiring manager. And that's the one thing that for me, it's worked in my favor, right? I feel that hiring managers have trusted me based on previous actions and certain things that myself and my team have done above and beyond for some of them. And you know what? Actually, now that you've mentioned it, Felix, I'll give you one perfect example. At Data Zoo, I actually had a VP of engineering who was actually not a very trusting person. And I remember when I first met him, he would basically, kind of give me the side eye a little bit, sometimes because he was just that type of very cautious individual. And I remember saying to my team, you know what? I'm going to break this guy. I'm going to get him to love me and trust me, right? And it's little things like, for example, we used to do community lunches every Friday. I would make a point to sit with him and his team. And I would just insert myself into their table and I would be like, how are all my engineers doing today? What's going on? What do people have planned for the weekends, right? I have to say, if I ever lose my memory one day, I am no good because I do have an amazing memory. So I remember their children's names. I remember, like what their kids like to do or like, how's your wife doing? So it was building that type of relationship, aside from work, having that rapport that made them comfortable with me, that they're like, hey, you know what? Linda's actually a good person. She's decent. Right. And sometimes I will share the challenges that we face in HR and I will go to them and I will say, I need your advice. What are your thoughts about this? Right. So for me, it's all about building that rapport and that relationship and that trust. And once you've established that foundation, you're not coming to them to try to change their mindset as, an outsider. You are now someone that they're like, wow, this person is really taking a vested interest in our organization or in my team. So I used to say to myself and my team members on every Monday and Tuesday, go and talk to the engineers, ask to be involved in their scrum meetings. Don't say a word, just be a fly on the wall. Management consulting team with the project managers, can we just sit in on some of the calls with your team? We won't say anything, right? Unless if you give us a speaking part. We just want to be able to help and have insight and understand what you're working on so that we can be a better business partner. And for me, that has worked really, really well. And that is a rule that I still follow until this day.
That's so important. And what a good place to end. All of this is built on a foundation of trust. At the end of the day, it's just human and human.
Exactly.
Linda, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you both, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.